AntiDrug Coalition and Karen Pershing, her work is the gold standard. In this role, she provides organizational oversight and helps guide AntiDrug Coalition's mission. And with over 30 years of experience in public health, Karen has devoted her career to improving the health of families in Knoxville. She works with local and state policymakers to advocate for laws that help prevent substance abuse and its consequences, and she is passionate about prescription drug abuse prevention, specifically targeting neonatal abstinence syndrome and increasing access to treatment options for pregnant women. In 2012, she was chosen as one of only 4 community leaders to serve on a statewide planning group to develop a 5-year prevention plan for Tennessee. Karen is a graduate of Leadership Knoxville class of 2013 and Women's Addiction Services Leadership Institute class of 2013. The Knox County Prescription Drug Task Force that was formed under her leadership has been recognized as a model coalition by the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Please join me in welcoming Karen Pershing.
Good afternoon. Thanks to those of you who are staying with it, right? It's been a long day, a lot of great information, great speakers, and I appreciate you all hanging with us. So I want to first recognize all of the other anti-drug coalitions who are represented here. So if you are with an anti-drug coalition in Tennessee, will you please stand up and let us recognize you? This is, we do a lot of hard work, and a lot of these folks are in local communities with resources, but limited resources, doing amazing work. And so I just want to make sure I'm up here on the stage, but I feel like all of them are here with me whenever I get up and speak, because I'm speaking on behalf of all of us and the work that we do. So I'm looking for the clicker. I found it. So I'm going to talk about collective impact, but before I do that, I first want to talk about, some of you may or may not be familiar with coalitions and the work that they do. So I think it's important that you kind of understand coalitions first, and then we'll get into the collective impact model and how this could be used either at the local level, state level, or actually there's been collective impact models that have been used at the federal level and also globally around some really big issues. So it's a tool and a model that can be used at various levels. So the AntiDrug Coalition, okay, making sure that worked. Again, it's an anti-drug coalition that has been in the Knoxville community. We've been around for over 33 years, which is kind of wild to think about. I have not been there 33 years, but when I look at my career, I actually could have been there all 33 years, but I was actually involved with the coalition back in the early 90s, when I worked for the Knox County Health Department at that time, doing drug prevention work out of the health department. And so I was part of the coalition at that time. So when I took this job in 2010, there was a certain aspect of it where it was like I was coming back home. And so I was just pleased and honored to have been chosen to become the executive director of an organization that I had such fond memories and had such wonderful experiences working with. So when we talk about prevention, we are simply stopping something before it starts, right? It's pretty simple. If prevention works, then something doesn't happen. But do we really understand prevention and the role that it plays? Because I can tell you, when we're in the midst of a crisis, prevention kind of gets lost, and the value of prevention. Because when prevention works, you don't see anything, right? So how do you value something that you don't see happen? which is always our challenge, is how do we gather data and information and really prove our value. And we've gotten a lot better over the years at being able to articulate the work and the value that we bring, but it's still very challenging because we live in a society that basically wants to fix things when they're broken, but we don't necessarily want to go upstream and keep it from breaking before it happens. So we're constantly challenged with that. When we are talking about substance misuse, the role of prevention is really part of a continuum. And I know you've heard a little bit about this today. So anywhere within this continuum, along this continuum, there's opportunities for involvement. So whether that be on the prevention end, which is on the left-hand side here, where coalitions tend to focus, or whether it's in the intervention or recovery end of the spectrum, there is opportunities to intervene at any point along that continuum. And so depending on what you're doing in your organization or your agency, and what your mission is, you may fit differently in this continuum than another organization. And that's the beauty of it, is the fact that we can all work together within that continuum of services. So the idea is really, we're focused on, again, on primary prevention, which is the education. We do a lot of advocacy around treatment and recovery, because what we realize is that if we're going to decrease the demand for drugs in our community, the way we have to do that is to also advocate for treatment to be available when people need it, and have the recovery supports available in our community to keep people in long-term recovery. Because the bottom line is, if there's fewer demand for drugs, so through prevention, primary prevention, those people who never start using, and then getting people treated and in long-term recovery, we will reduce the demand for drugs in our communities and in our state. The supply side, again, you've heard about that today, is very important as well. But we really have got to look at demand reduction if we're truly going to see everything change and switch. A key role, of course, in substance misuse prevention is really what we work on is trying to delay the onset of initial use. And, you know, people look at me like, what are you talking about? You can't delay that. You know, kids are going to be kids and they're going to try things. Well, that's not true. And there's hard facts and hard data around this concept, that the longer we can push out the initiation of any substance use whatsoever with young people, the fewer people we're going to have as adults who have substance use disorders. So you heard from, and have heard stories, many of you, from people in recovery, and when do most of them start using drugs? Adolescence, right? So data shows you've got an undeveloped brain, right? So that prefrontal cortex that Dr. Lloyd spoke about this morning is not fully developed until you're around 25. So you take an immature brain and you introduce substances that are addictive, and that immature brain actually becomes addicted much faster than a fully matured brain with a prefrontal cortex. So again, that's why you see people that, again, like he mentioned, that maybe 30 years old, and you're working with them, and they act like they're 12 because they started using drugs when they're 12. They stop their brain development at that point, and so they've got some catching up, maturity-wise, to do before they're going to start making really good decisions. So prevention really wants to delay the initiation of that onset. So again, if we know that young people who use, and this is from the National Institutes of Drug Abuse, so this isn't stuff I'm pulling out of my hair or out of my own head. This is data that's been validated through research and science, that students or young people who start using before age 14 are 17.5 times more likely to have a substance use disorder as an adult. Now, on the flip side, again, this is not apples to apples data. These points are very different. If you can keep a young person away from any substance, by the time they graduate from high school, they only have a 2% chance of having a substance use disorder. Again, those aren't apples and apples, so you can't do like exact math here, but I like the second option much better. It doesn't take a whole lot of mathematics to figure out where you're going to put your money if you're a betting person. So again, the trifecta for youth, and this is what we have to keep our eyes on for substance use and initiation, is nicotine, tobacco, nicotine, of course, alcohol, and THC or marijuana, what's in the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. So those three things are the most popular substances among our young people. So we as adults, it's not good for us to say, oh, well, they're just smoking. It's not a big deal. Or they're just drinking a little. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. It is a big deal. And so whether it's a legal substance or something illegal, it doesn't matter. It's still hitting that immature brain. And that child is going to become one of those statistics which is going to make them more likely to have problems later on in life too. So how do anti-drug coalitions work? We use SAMHSA's strategic prevention framework, which is really a public health approach to substance use disorders. So many of you all are familiar with programs, prevention programs. You go in and you might get at-risk kids and you might do a evidence-based curriculum for 20 students, and you try to reshape them and make sure that we build resiliency in those groups, and which are great programs. But anti-drug coalitions are actually looking at that 300-foot level, and we're looking at what's going on in the community that are contributing factors to adolescent use or the prevention of adolescent use, and trying to put barriers in place, whether that be through policies, whether that be through educating adults, whether that be through equipping students with information and knowledge. And so sometimes it's a little bit difficult for anti-drug coalitions, again, to articulate the work that we do, because unless you understand public health work in a public health model, Joe Q. Public sometimes scratches their head and goes, you do what? You just have meetings and you work on policies, and people don't understand the value in that. So we're constantly trying to make sure we educate people better on what it is that we do. So in this framework, what we do is really, we're looking at assessing our communities, and that's a constant process. So it's not something that, once a year or once every 3 years we go, oh, we should probably do an assessment, right? And see what's going on in our community. Every time we get a new piece of data, and whether it be something from the criminal justice system, whether it be, health-related data, whether it be treatment data, we add that to what we're doing and say, okay, what is this telling us about what's going on in our community, and how can we go upstream of that data point? So it's constant. It's a cyclical process that really never ends. So this is the first job I can tell you. Those of you who know me really well in the room have this joke about me that if Karen gets bored, it's not a good thing. So I can tell you in this job, Dr. Lloyd's laughing at me. In this job, I can tell you in the 9 years I've been in it, I don't get bored. So that's a very good thing for me, because there is always questions that I have that can't be answered yet. And so I'm constantly driving people crazy with all my questions, which is what we do with coalitions too. We bring all these diverse stakeholders together to go, can you help me with this question? I'm struggling here, and you have knowledge and information that I don't have, so help me out. So again, we use strategic plans in that process, and then we implement evidence-based strategies. And then we're constantly monitoring and reevaluating what we're doing to make sure that we're having an impact. And some of those indicators, are easy to monitor and measure, and then others, we may only be able to measure something once every couple years to know whether or not we're having impact. So it can be a little bit challenging sometimes getting really, really meaty and good data in a timely manner. Now, we couldn't do what we do, again, I kind of mentioned this, without cross-sector collaboration. So as we build capacity, which is one of our jobs, is to try to create more capacity in our coalition throughout our community so that we have diverse representation of experiences, of professionals, so that, again, as we're going upstream of these issues, the more knowledge that we have, the more effective our interventions are going to be. Because, again, I don't know everything. And I can venture to say everybody in this room doesn't know everything. But we're all experts in our particular chosen fields. And so by us all coming together, we learn from each other, and we can also identify where we can collaborate and how we can address an issue from that's multifaceted from different ways that we can attack a particular problem. So not all communities in Tennessee have an anti-drug coalition. Oop, I must be behind. So these are our 12 sectors that and you can see it's pretty broad. I need to look back every once in a while, make sure I'm on the right slide. So those of you who are not familiar with anti-drug coalitions and don't know whether or not you have one in your community, we actually have a state association called the Prevention Alliance of Tennessee. And if you go to their website, you can see a listing of all of the anti-drug coalitions throughout the state. With their contact information. So I strongly encourage you, if you're from another county and you don't know if you have a coalition, to go to this site and look and see. We have over 50 anti-drug coalitions right now. We do not have one in every county. That's a dream that we would have that at some point. We're continuing, the state's really working to try to fund new coalitions to get them up and running. So every year we add a few more as funding becomes available through the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. But sometimes just grassroots organizations start a coalition with no money. So money doesn't always mean or keep someone from gathering folks and starting a collaborative effort. Now I'm going to describe a model that can be used to address complex issues such as substance misuse with all of you. Okay. Some of you may have heard this term before, but others may not, and that's collective impact. And it's somewhat similar to the work that anti-drug coalitions do on a regular basis, but I say it's collaboration on steroids, and pardon the drug pun, occupational hazard here. But it really does establishing it, you really have to have 5 things, conditions that are required. You really have to have a common agenda, which is simply a problem we all agreed needs to be addressed. Y'all wouldn't be here if you didn't think the substance use problem needed to be addressed. Would you be here? You spent all day here, right? Are y'all tired of talking about this? Yes. Somebody said no. Okay. But anyway, I'm done with the chatter. And of course, I've been working on it for a long time, but we need to get more and more people mobilized. And so collective impact is a way that we can mobilize even more partners and bring more people to the table to work together. So the first condition that you have to have in place is you have to have a common agenda, again, and have that problem that we all agree needs to be addressed. Secondly, we must agree on shared measurements. How are we going to know whether or not we're having an impact? So what are the measurements we have available to us? If we don't have measurements available to us, are there ways that we can create data collection tools within our community to gather data that we're going to need for a collaborative effort to measure our success over time? Because again, you don't know if you're having an impact if you can't measure it. So measurement is extremely important. And I think a lot of times we tend to overlook how important it is, because it's hard to stay motivated if you don't see some of that data moving in the direction you want it to go in. So some of the key community indicators, and we do have systems in place to measure those. We have to make sure that we have those in place before we land on them. So if somebody else owns that data, you're going to have to make sure that data, they're going to be committed to providing that data to you long term and have them at the table from the beginning. Third, we have to have a mutually reinforcing activities, so a strategic plan, which simply means all the participants' activities must be differentiated. So again, people can be coming at this from different approaches, different angles, but must be mutually reinforcing the plan of action that the group has developed and established. Fourth, we must have continuous and open communication. Communication's key to everything, especially when you're doing cross-sector collaboration. You've got to build trust, and trust is only built over time. Assure mutual objectives and create common motivation. Again, communication is key to all of those. And then fifth, there has to be a backbone organization or organizations, it could be more than one, that shares that responsibility, that's willing to commit the resources to coordinate the efforts of the initiative. Okay, it likes me and then it doesn't. I went too far. Okay. Next, I want to explain the difference between isolated impact versus collective impact. And I think once I go through this, you'll be able to see how often we operate in these isolated silos and how our funding streams also almost throw us into our isolated silos, because we have to continuously put these grant applications forward, and we have to prove our agency is the best agency out there to do this. All of you who are in nonprofit work know how this game is played, right? And so you're competing with other partners and agencies who you really need to be working with. And so funding can be really challenging sometimes to get funders to actually look at funding differently. So isolated impact is really funding just a single agency and the outcomes that they're going to have in isolation from everything else that's going on. And so the keys to long-term sustainable change on the flip side are about taking all that great work and aligning all of that work together towards common goals. And so getting funders to look at bringing these collaborative efforts together and funding the collaborative with multiple organizations and agencies all working together is a huge transition and a shift. But I think it's something, if you can get your collective impact model established, I think funders are going to be lapping this up because they're putting a lot of money out there right now and they're getting a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but not a lot of anything. And collective impact could give us a lot and really move the marble. So I think as we move towards more of these collective impact models, I think we're going to see a shift in the way funds are distributed, especially through private foundations. So isolated collective impact calls for funders, again, to understand that social problems require the interaction of many organizations within a larger system. And you've heard that all day today, right? I mean, how many different organizations and agencies and representatives have been up here on the stage today? And you see now, even at the federal level, the different agencies collaborating. You see at the state level here in Tennessee, the different agencies coming together and collaborating. And so it's important for us at the local community level to make sure that we're all collaborating, whether that be you define your community as a region or whether you define your community as a single county. You all have to determine that when you're pulling your collaborative impact model together. What defines you geographically, and how are you going to define that geography and those agencies? How are you going to bring them together? So when we're isolated, again, nonprofits work separately and compete based on independent impact, while collective impact measures the progress we make on working towards the same goals and shared measurements. In isolated impact, we evaluate a single organization's impact. In collective, we're doing larger scale impact, and it depends on that cross-sector alignment and learning. A lot of it is the value in learning from each other as part of that process as well. Isolated impact involves scaling up a single organization to create larger change, while collective impact brings in corporate and government sectors and not just community-based organizations. So, and that's what I think coalitions are trying to understand or are getting that now, is that we've got to get the business community involved. And I think the whole economic issue and trying to make a case for that, how it impacts our communities economically, can really help drive them to the table to be part of the solution as well. In isolated impact, these sectors are often disconnected from the efforts of foundations and nonprofits. And then lastly, collective impact brings an opportunity for organizations to coordinate their action and share successes as well as challenges. There are certain conditions you need to identify and make sure are in place before launching a collective impact model. Those are, you've got to have an influential champion. So you've got to have somebody willing to get out front and say, we have to do something about this. And it's the Pied Piper, and whoever that Pied Piper might be in your community or in your region, you got to get them out there and in front of this. And we are fortunate. We are going to be launching a collective impact model tomorrow with All for Knox. Do we know what we're doing? Not exactly, but we're going to figure it out as we go. But we have the opportunity now. We have two mayors, our city and our county mayor, who are passionate about this issue and doing something about it. And so when those mayors lined up, when our new county mayor was elected, I said, this is it. This is our time. And so either we seize this opportunity or we let it go by. And it's a little unnerving, I'll be honest with you. I'm a little scared, but it's a good scared, you know? Sometimes you just have to put yourself out there. And so we're getting ready to launch that tomorrow. And so I'll be able to tell you more in a year or so how that is going. So again, we've got that influential champion, and again, each community, region, state, however that's defined, has to figure out who that champion is and who people will listen to and follow. And again, we're not asking them to do anything but to rally the troops for us. But having their voice is a huge issue and very important. Adequate financial resources, which is always a tricky one, right? We can all say we'll never have enough money. We're never going to have enough money, right? But you just heard about all these buckets of money that are coming in, either the state's allocating or the federal government sending to our state. So there are more resources now than we ever have had. So I just want to make sure that's clear. So if we can take the resources we have now and better align and coordinate those resources, we'll actually make those resources go much further than the way we're operating right now. Plus, if you've got a collective impact model and you're showing where you've aligned resources, and then you can also very scientifically, through your data and your collaborative, identify where your gaps and needs are, you're going to submit a much more effective grant proposal with all of these partners at the table than you would submitting one as a siloed organization. So again, I'm not going to let resources stop us because I do think we have the ability to move forward with what we have and make the most of it and add to it as we go forward. So the last thing is, do we have a sense of urgency for change? Can I get an amen? Is everybody sick and tired of this? I don't know about you guys, but I am. You know, sitting there listening to the first and second panel this morning, and the pain and the devastation, and that this has affected all of us in one way or another, whether we've been personally touched by it or we know somebody close to us who have been personally touched by it. It's a terrible, horrible thing, and we're losing way too many lives. So I think we have, again, that urgency for change, and everybody is tired, and everybody is ready for some renewed hope and optimism. And this is what a collective impact model can actually bring to the table as well. So collective impact, again, requires commitment over time. Complex issues such as substance misuse requires us all to continue to dig deeply and to challenge our personal biases. We all have our biases, and we're lying to ourselves if we don't believe that we do have. And so we have to be able to challenge those as well as addressing systemic issues as we move forward. The components needed to succeed are really a strong governance structure and infrastructure. Strategic planning is key, especially if you've got multiple partners. If you don't have a well-developed plan, everybody's going to be going off in their own direction like they have done all along. So you've got to have that plan that everybody refers back to, and you hold everyone accountable for their pieces in that plan. Community involvement and evaluation, again, are extremely important, and that continuous improvement. Again, you're going to keep learning as you move forward in a collective impact model. And so strategic planning is a fluid process. So as you're doing strategic planning, sometimes you have to back up and go, oh, this isn't working. I think we need to adjust our plan. And so you have to be very, very flexible in doing this kind of work. So phase one is really initiating action. There are 3 phases. So it's identifying those champions, forming those cross-sector groups, mapping the landscape, and using data to make the case. Again, what are you trying to solve? What are you trying to fix here? Be very specific. facilitating community outreach. Who is not at the table that needs to be here? Which groups are not represented? Because again, I think those of us who work in it sometimes forget that some of the grassroots people who are at the neighborhood level can tell us a whole lot more about what's really happening than what we're going to learn in a report or a textbook or anywhere else. And so we need to make sure we're including those people in our collaborative efforts. Then phase 2 is organizing for impact, which really involves creating the infrastructure, creating that common agenda, engaging the community, and again, however that community is defined, and establishing those shared metrics. I got the 1 minute sign, I'm gonna have to hurry. Phase 3 is sustained action and implementation activities. So continued engagement and advocacy, as well as collecting, tracking, and reporting progress. Phase 3 can go on for years. And when you're talking about a problem like this, it's gonna be a long-term commitment. The keys to success for collective impact model is to build on existing collaborative efforts. There's a lot of great work already going on in our state. And so we just need to build on that and align it so that we're all going in the same direction. We all have to be realistic about the time it's gonna take. It's not gonna be a quick fix. And this, okay, trying to see where I am here. Probably gonna have to skip some of this. I've gone through a lot of this really on the agenda, but again, the key is to be flexible and to know that it's gonna be messy. It's not an easy process, and it's gonna be fragile too, because you're working with people. And so whenever you're working with diverse groups, again, you're going to be challenged on things, and we're going to have to work through those issues as they come up. So I'm going to end here. Collective impact, again, is not easy. But what it brings us is the intangible benefit that can be in short supply, and that is hope. If there is no hope, we lose our sense of optimism and our belief that our future can look much differently. I love this quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which says it very simply: everything that is done in the world is done by hope. I want to end with this collective. Okay, something else. My word cloud, I love word clouds. With the collective impact word cloud, the word that stands out and is central is what? Community, right? We all play an important role in making our community and state a place where we meet people where they are without judgment and provide hope, healing, and a sense of purpose. Thank you.